Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking with the Experts. My name is Mike Nichols and I'm the content and social media manager for AEM. And today I have James Logan with me. We'll be talking about the crazy weather we've been having all around the world this summer and how the growing frequency of extreme weather poses a really special challenge for trying to assess environmental risks. James has been on our program before, but for those of you who may not know him, he currently leads AEM's water sector. And even more relevant than that for today's discussion, James has an incredible amount of experience with the design and installation of monitoring and early warning systems that are used to mitigate exposure to all sorts of environmental risks. He's been involved in the assessment and design and development and implementation of more than 200 such systems, both in the US and in abroad. And he's led numerous consulting studies related to environmental monitoring and risk mitigation. So, James, thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me here, Mike.
So, James, why don't we go ahead and start by reviewing some of this crazy weather we've been seeing this summer. I think probably the one thing we can all relate to in the Northern Hemisphere is that it has been hot.
Yeah, if it feels hotter than normal, it's because there's been the weather or the heat has been unprecedented this year. So, a few examples of that is that it's been the hottest June since record keeping of temperatures around the world began back since 1850. So, the hottest we've ever seen. July was the hottest of any month ever recorded. There's cities that have been setting records for all-time highs all around the world. Places in Texas and in Europe and in Africa, all over the world, in China. So this temperature is something that we've just never seen before.
Yeah, well, that explains why it's been so hot. But I mean, that's not it though, right? Seems like large portions of the globe have either been getting drenched by rain and flooding or scorched by fire too.
Yeah, there has been a lot of an uptick in extreme weather events around the world, and a lot of it is a result of these higher temperatures because the temperatures are causing weather to behave differently than it's behaved in the past. So there has been a lot of rain and a lot of fire events. We sort of see more intense rain in some places, and we're seeing hotter temperatures and drier weather in other places, and we're seeing fires in places and in intensity of fires that we've never seen before also. So there's a lot of extreme weather behavior happening around the world.
So, why don't we dive in a little bit deeper there, James? You mentioned fires in places and intensities that we've not seen. You want to go over some of what we have been seeing?
Yeah, so there's a few things that have been happening. I think a lot of people have heard about the fires in Canada. So Canada has had their a record-breaking fire season so far. They've had 44,200 fires since the beginning of the year, and they've burned 27 million acres of land. And this is only halfway into the fire season for Canada. So they're seeing with the number of fires and the amount of fires, it's an amazing amount of land that's being burnt up. To sort of give you some perspective, the amount of land that's burnt is something like the state of Virginia or the size of Greece, mainland Greece. So that's a lot of land that's burning right now up in Canada. They're also more recently there's these fires in Hawaii that I think it's been big on the news because I think at this point in the fires they've found that 96 people have been killed in them. It's the worst fire event for loss of life in 100 years in the U.S. So that's really a tragedy, and it's just some amazing weather events are causing these things, and it's it's unfortunate, but when these things happen, we have to be sort of aware and actually prepare ourselves and have some diligence to avoid these types of things. So,
Wow, that is just crazy. But it's not just fire either, right? We're also seeing a lot of uptick in terms of rain and flood events, also, aren't we?
Yeah. So flooding is also happening in many places around the world. We've had in the U.S. here, we've had some record-breaking flooding in areas like Chicago and Kentucky. In Kentucky, they had a rain event that caused 1,000-year flood, and so that the flooding is happening all over the United States. There's been flash flooding throughout the U.S. in different places. We're seeing it in the world also. In China, been some severe flooding in China. Up in Canada and Nova Scotia, they've had some really heavy rainfall that's caused problems there. Other places in the world, in India, there's been flooding. And also in South Korea, there's been flooding, which has resulted in a bunch of landslides and flash flooding that's killed 46 people there. So there is flooding all around the world also, and these extreme weather events sort of cause extreme things to happen.
Wow, James, yeah, that is really crazy. But it kind of hits on an interesting problem and kind of a concerning problem. If these weather events are becoming so much more intense and more frequent, doesn't that pose a problem for how we evaluate and plan for environmental threats? I mean, I always thought we looked at what happened in the past to anticipate what's going to happen in the future. Doesn't seem like that approach would be very reliable now, would it?
Um, yeah, you make some good points, Mike. And the short answer is yes, it is a problem. For example, there was a Pew Research report that came out in November of 2022, just less than a year ago. And places have set wildfire budgets by looking backwards at time at fire. And because things are changing and getting more intense, they don't really have the budget to cover the things that are happening as we go forward. And that's one of the problems about using historical information to make your decisions going forward, because if historically the intensity of the events have been less and now they're becoming more intense, then you don't really have the budget to deal with the problem. So that's an example. So we in the US, that's sort of how they define the intensity of events, is they use historical information to define the intensity going forward. But it's actually what we're seeing nowadays. It's worse than you can
Would you
imagine.
would you say we've got a similar problem on the flood side as well, James, or is that mainly an issue with wildfire?
It's true. It's true on the flooding side. So flooding, the way they define flood events is also using historical information of rainfall and past flood events. And historically, that information, we only use the information that we've recorded. So that's that's part of the problem is we've only been recording things for in general about 150 years at the most, and that during that period, we're seeing more intense events today than we were seeing over that period. So that period didn't capture the frequency and intensity of events that we see today. And so that's the challenge we have.
Yeah, so I mean, so that's a really good way to frame up the challenge, but then you can guess what my next question is, right? So if we can't just be looking at what's happened in the past, how should we be evaluating the potential for environmental threats, right? What should we be doing?
Well, so I think everybody should use information to help them understand the what to do next. And what I would recommend is that your agency or your entity perform a risk assessment so you can understand the potential hazards, what potential vulnerabilities that your agency has, and what is the resulting risk from those things. It allows you to plan for on mitigating the risk and how and prepare should any of those hazards occur. So and then once you sort of have that, then the next step is putting in place monitoring and forecasting, because the monitoring helps track and verify events as they occur. It gives you the current situation, gives you good good information. It also informs the initial state of all the models that are used, so that having good, accurate, current information helps the models perform better and do a better job of predicting the future. So once you put all these things together, then you sort of have a system that can help give you early warning and help people prepare for these type of events. So also a thought here is that these events are dynamic. So as times change, both the hazards are changing, like we're seeing now with more extreme weather events. The vulnerabilities change because as your city or county or state or country, as populations move around and new areas get developed, you have new areas of vulnerability that you have to take into account. And so all that should be a constant process, that you renew your understanding of your vulnerabilities to the hazards that you have, and also understanding of the changes to the hazards that are happening, so that you can get a better understanding of your risk profile and how to manage your way through it.
That makes a lot of sense, James. Thank you. That's really eye-opening. If our audience members might have any concerns about themselves not having an accurate or current picture of the environmental threats they're facing, what would you recommend?
So I'd recommend having some people come in that understand risk, understand how to do risk assessments for hazards. So it's one of the things that we do is we help some of our clients. We help them understand the potential hazards that they have. We help them understand the where they have vulnerabilities in their areas, and we put that information together to come up with a good understanding of the risk profiles that they have for the various hazards. And then they use that information for planning and for preparing for those types of hazards. So it's something we can help people with. We do that as part of our work here.
Great. Thank you, James. Unfortunately, with that, I think that we're running out of time. So that brings our conversation to an end. So James, thank you very much for being here. Really do appreciate you sharing a little time with us.
Okay, well, thanks, Mike. It was my pleasure to be here. So thanks.
And for all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope our conversation helped you learn something new about how to assess environmental risks in a world where those threats are unfortunately continuing to escalate. Until next time, this is Mike Nichols for AEM and Talking with the Experts.